Around the 19th century, asylums started popping up everywhere in America.
While it might have been with good intentions, institutionalizing women became another form of subjugation of women.
And diagnoses had no psychological basis and were made off of sexist assumptions and ideologies of what constitutes as a proper woman.
Let's talk about that. The patriarchy and gender roles greatly influenced the process of institutionalizing someone and the basis of diagnosis.
The year is 1851 in Illinois, and a law is passed that states married women and infants who are evidently insane or distracted may be entered or detained in the hospital on the request of the husband of the woman, even without the evidence of insanity required in other cases.
The intentions of this law were to keep women from the humiliation of being declared insane in a public courtroom. But the reality of it was, women began to be locked up in asylums by their husbands with no just cause.
30 other states passed laws similar to the one in Illinois. Now, this is where it all goes wrong. Women were diagnosed with hysteria if they said or did things that went against patriarchal values. Do you realize how ridiculous that is? That is the equivalent of hitting someone and then diagnosing them with an IED when they get upset at you.
Additionally, many doctors at the time blamed the female organ and reproductive system as a source of insanity. I have no words to describe how invalid that is.
Pay attention. There are two very important women that are going to be introduced in a bit. Their story and work is essential to know.
Nellie Bly, a journalist, feigned insanity in order to witness the conditions women in the Blackwell Island Asylum were living in. In a matter of days, she was admitted under a false identity. She went on to publish a book called 10 Days in a Madhouse. I would just like to point out that she faked her way into an asylum.
Women's hospitalization was purely based off of their husband's testimony. Women could do nothing to change their situation. This is exemplified by the fact that there was a gap in male to female testimonies when it came to accusing someone with insanity, with a total of 434 male depositions recorded compared to just 66 female.
Nellie Bly was in the asylum along with 1,600 other women who did not even belong there.
Another famous case was Elizabeth Packard's. Elizabeth questioned the belief of her husband, a Calvinist minister named Reverend Theophilus Packard. On June 18, 1860, he ordered doctors and the sheriff to take his wife to the Illinois Hospital for the Insane. In Elizabeth's book, Modern Persecution, she described how her husband broke down her door with an axe. Then 2 doctors came in, measured her pulse, and declared her insane for having a quick pulse, and took her away. Of course she's going to have a quick pulse. You broke down her door with an axe.
Elizabeth argued that the Constitution gave her the right as a citizen to state her opinion, and her husband replied with, "Yes, to all citizens it does defend this right, but you are not a citizen. While a married woman, you are a legal non-entity, without even a soul in law. In short, you are dead as to any legal existence, while a married woman, and therefore have no legal protection as a married woman." What a jerk!
Unlike most women, Elizabeth was allowed a trial. However, she was still charged with insanity and sent to an asylum. According to Elizabeth, the prosecution won the case after presenting 2 pieces of evidence. 1, she gave $1 toward building a Catholic church, and 2, that once when she made biscuits for dinner, she had unexpected company call and had not enough bread for the table. I want to know what kind of judge or jury heard that and thought, yep, she's definitely crazy.
Anyways, the point is, as you can clearly see, mental diagnosis is purely based off of sexist ideologies. Because Packard had the audacity to share her opinion and didn't tend to the house like women should, she was declared insane. Women were basically sent to asylums as an alternative to divorce.
The irrationality and inhumanity of the treatment towards women incontestably exposed the sexist ideologies that were embedded and induced by men in the asylums.
Many theories on insanity existed where there was a strong correlation between insanity and sexual behavior. They proposed that evidence of promiscuity was a woman's submission to forced sex, which led many hospitalized women to be target of sexual assault. When interviewed about this, Nellie's doctor responded, "All insane girls like to be treated that way. I don't have to be a doctor to tell you that women, insane or not, do not like to be raped."
I can't even imagine the sexual misconduct that must have run rampant in these asylums. In addition to this, they were still required to maintain their image and perform womanly duties. They were forcibly stripped, given a cold shower, and rubbed raw. Additionally, they were ordered to make the beds, and some of the patients were put to scrubbing, even to cleaning the nurses' bedrooms and caring for their clothing.
Silas Weir Mitchell, MD, developed the rest cure during the period of Victorianism in the U.S. The rest cure required the patient to stay in bed from 6 weeks to 2 months. For at least a month, the patient is not allowed to sit up, which means no reading, writing, or sewing. In some cases, the patient was not allowed to turn over without help.
Consequently, many women were put into straitjackets and chained to the wall. 18 patients restrained or seclusion in the New York State psychiatric hospitals died. Many people were also left secluded. 4 of the 18 deaths cited in the state report occurring in the seclusion recalling 2 suicides and a fatal burning, while a patient tried to attract the attention of a staff member with a lighter. This is a Belgian cage in which some patients were forced into.
Sometimes the abuse is just purely inhumane. Here are some examples of what Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Packard experienced or saw. 1. When allowed to take a walk through Coney Island as a collective, Bly describes how she saw a woman from another asylum with a long cable rope fastened to wide leather belts, and these belts locked around the waists of 52 women. At the end of the rope was a heavy iron cart.
2. Nellie states how, for crying, the nurses beat me with a broom handle and jumped on me. Then they tried to tie my hands and feet and threw a sheet over my head and twisted it tightly around my throat so I could not scream, and thus put me in a bathtub filled with cold water.
Elizabeth saw one altercation between a nurse, Miss de la Haye, and a patient that led to the patient having a bleeding throat due to the nurse digging in her fingernails.
And lastly, one patient was accused of stealing an attendant's keys. The attendant tore off all of her clothing and then pounded her on the bowels and head, kicking her furiously, tore out her hair, and beat her nose heavily against the floor. The attendant later found the key and realized that she was the one that misplaced it.
The cruel and inhumane treatment of these women was despicable. It drove some sane women to insanity. Nellie Bly's comment on this mistreatment is as follows. Here is a class of women sent to be cured. I would like the expert physicians who are condemning me for my action, which has proved their ability to take a perfectly sane and healthy woman, shut her up and make her sit from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. on straight back benches, do not allow her to talk or move during these hours, give her no reading, and let her know nothing of the world or its doings, give her bad food and harsh treatment, and see how long it will take her to make her insane.
The exposure of the abuse and sexism in asylums led to reforms which helped mental institutions to carry out its original purpose, helping those in need.
When Packard was released from the asylum 3 years later, she became an advocate for women's rights, which led to the passing of the Personal Liberty Bill in 1865.
The Personal Liberty Bill states, "Thus the public may see that under the humane provisions of this act, all inmates of every insane asylum in the state of Illinois who have been incarcerated without the verdict of a jury are now entitled to a jury trial. Now, all married women who had been imprisoned without evidence of insanity would now be liberated from their false imprisonment."
An amendment she proposed in 1867 made the jury trial retroactive for those institutionalized before 1865 and added stiff penalties for noncompliance.
A third law, passed in 1869 with the help of Chicago attorneys and women's rights activists Mira and James Bradwell, specified that married women would keep any income that they earned.
Dorothea Lynn Dix founded a New Jersey State Hospital, which is now called the Trenton Psychiatric Hospital today, in the 1840s. The psychiatric hospital staff ensured the patient and the patient's family received compassionate care.
These reforms later led to the deinstitutionalization movement of the 1950s.
In conclusion, most people believed a woman's place was at home. If a woman were to rebel against domesticity, they were declared insane and committed to an asylum. The conflict was mental diagnoses were not based on mental capacity, but rather sexist ideologies. A few women, like Elizabeth Packard and Dorothea Dix, raised awareness around wrongful accusations of insanity against women. The compromise or resolution was that many reforms were made after Elizabeth and Nellie published their books. The act of fighting for what is right and the sparking of revolutionary reforms is what led to the justifiable treatment women were and are rightfully entitled to.
This has been Veronica.
And Elsa.
And Tiffany,
Remember,
happy wife, happy life.
Ba 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 ba